cold in New York City, freezing cold in New York City. But I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, in my bedroom. Fingers crossed, soon we'll be having the bookshelf behind us again. And we're going to have one of our lovely evening chats. So welcome, welcome. Glad you all are here. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. Be sure to bring all your friends and family here. Post this on Reddit. Post this on Facebook. Post this on Twitter. Make this a bigger conversation. The more people that are here, the happier all of us are. I am back on the unnamed orange beverage. That's what I have with me tonight. Orange juice. Yeah, I'm just glad to be in here in my nice warm apartment. So I don't have a big, long, epic speech to make tonight before we get into the super chats, but I do have a few things I wanted to update you on. So I'll just get into that. Then we'll do our roll call, and then after that we will do the super chat questions, and then we'll be done. And we'll keep going as long as super chats keep coming in, and that's how we'll do it. So, couple things. I wanted to mention that, folks, we are a force to be reckoned with. We, as in this community, the folks here who are regulars on these lives, who enjoy these broadcasts, we are a force to be reckoned with. Folks, I was just having a normal day yesterday. Normal day yesterday, and I was living my life. Went to work, had kind of a busy afternoon, did a number of, reports, had kind of a busy schedule, went home. All of a sudden I'm getting messages from people. You're all over the Jimmy Dore show. And I said, what? People are messaging you. I think Shaniqua from Buffalo sent me a message. Somebody on Facebook sent me a message. A bunch of people on Twitter. Caleb, Jimmy Dore mentioned your name like 10 times tonight on the show. And I'm thinking, what? And I checked with people. I thought, if you hear this from one person, maybe they misheard him or they're a little off or whatever. But I heard this from like 6, 7, 8, 9 people. And they're telling me that apparently people that are fans of this broadcast, people who like what we do, noticed that Jimmy Dore had retweeted me a couple times on Thursday and dogpiled into his comments, and into his YouTubes. Were super chatting him, telling him he should have me on the show. And my name came up in the Jimmy Dore program about 10 times, roughly 10 times yesterday, from what I've been told. I haven't even seen it. Wow. Didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. Now, this is certainly not the first time that Jimmy Dore has mentioned my name and given a little bit of an acknowledgement to our community, but this was something special. So, as always, Jimmy Dore is welcome to send me a direct message on Twitter, email me, or whatever. I'd love to come on the Jimmy Dore show. I think that'd be a lot of fun. So if he said he intends to have me on, that's what he said. He's said that before. So if that's the case, yeah, let's keep doing it, folks. Wow. It sounds like we have a very, very activist-oriented community here, right? I know there's like multiple Discord servers of fans of what we do here. So there you go. So we got a couple super chats here. Brief unemployment councils. Thanks for keeping history alive. Well, thank you, Nay. So unemployment councils. All right, very good. We'll get to that when we're doing our super chats. Like I said, keep them rolling in, folks, because that will be the bulk of the show. I don't have an epic speech to begin with tonight. My opening remarks are probably not going to be too long, but I have a few points that I want to make to you all before we just start answering questions. One thing that happened today. So I made a point. Around noon, around 12:30, of taking a walk in my neighborhood. Figured that I would go eat lunch, and I would do it in the outdoor seating. Right? They've closed indoor seating in restaurants here in New York City again. Right? No indoor seating. Right? So, I assumed that there'd be outdoor seating, right? I saw that in the press there was a big hubbub because at first the original rules they made when they changed the rules again was that people at outdoor seating couldn't go into the restaurants to use the bathroom. There was a lot of hubbub. So I assumed that there'd be outdoor seating in the restaurants. And, you know, maybe I wouldn't be able to go to the bathroom or they changed the rule around that or whatever. That's what I thought would happen. So I walked in the cold. Walked over one street, walked over another street, walked over another street, got to the area in my neighborhood where all the restaurants are, the happening avenue in Brooklyn, in my Brooklyn neighborhood, the place where all the restaurants are. Most of the restaurants didn't even have the outdoor dining thing open, mainly because it's too cold. Like people wouldn't be up for it. So I was bummed. And I'm walking up and down. I could not find a place where I could sit and have outdoor dining until I finally found a sports bar. There was a sports bar in my neighborhood that was open for outdoor dining. They had little heaters, and they had like tents along the sidewalk, and they had little heaters in the tents. So I sat down next to one of these little heaters. Global reset. Next to one of these little heaters, I sat down. There was one other guy who was drinking a beer, he was drinking a beer at 12 in the afternoon, and it was pretty empty, and, it was a sports bar, and they have, like, the TVs of the sports bar, like, facing out into the street, so you can watch the game. Global reset. You can watch the game. So I'm sitting there in the sports bar, and I ordered a Reuben sandwich and some onion rings. They brought me my unnamed diet beverage. They brought me, so it was pretty decent, except it was freezing cold. Freezing cold. And I sat there, and I kept thinking I would get warmer as I sat next to the heater. I had my winter coat on. I'm sitting next to a heater. We're covered up from the wind. Freezing cold. Absolutely freezing cold. So in the freezing cold, with my winter fedora, warm fedora hat on, my winter coat on, I sat there and I drank unnamed diet beverage and water and ate a Reuben sandwich. And that was my outing for the day. And that was an experience. That's a sign of the times. Really is a sign of the times. That's where we're at. It's freezing cold in the wintertime, a few days before the Christmas holiday. And don't even think about sitting in a restaurant. But if you want to eat a sandwich, most places are closed. But just walk to the one that is open and sit there and freeze while you try to quickly, wolf down your Reuben sandwich. That was an experience for me. I will say, folks. Now, there's a lot of folks that are talking about the lockdown. There's a lot of folks that are talking about how it is just destroying small businesses. It is destroying the lives of working people. It has an economic devastation effect. I mean, it's like taking a wrecking ball to the U.S. economy. And, you look at some of these people who own restaurants, you look at store owners. I mean, I don't know. Did people see the video that went viral where there was the woman who has a bar in Los Angeles? She has a bar patio, and her bar patio is closed down. And just one property over is a Hollywood movie set. And at the Hollywood movie set, they've got a buffet set up. They're feeding the cast. And she's standing there crying. And she says, why is Hollywood and why are they essential? Why can they, have outdoor dining at their movie set? And we can't, I can't keep my bar patio on when I'm on the brink of going out of business. And she was quite emotional. It was very, very heartbreaking to watch that video. We had that weird meltdown by Tom Cruise. Did people hear that? Him screaming at his crew for not following the COVID regulations. Did people see that? Tom Cruise, there's an audio tape of him screaming and using the F word and not being the nicest guy and having a meltdown at his crew for not following the COVID restrictions. That was something else. These are hard times. And folks, I want to be careful with this because there's a certain crowd of people that say COVID is a hoax. It's not a hoax. I know people who've gotten it, for Christ's sakes. Okay, it is not a hoax, right? There are people who are not lying, who are not government agents who have gotten it. It is definitely a real disease that real people can catch, okay? So if you're trying to tell me that COVID-19 is a big Illuminati conspiracy, you're just wrong, okay? You're just wrong. And I have very little patience for that. I've got friends, there are people I know who believe that, and I don't hate them. I respect their right to be skeptical, but it's one thing to be skeptical of the restrictions. It's one thing to think that the lockdown. But if you start telling me that COVID is not real, you lost me at that point. I'm just no, it's real. It's a real disease. It's definitely a real disease. It has killed lots of people. The issue, I guess, is that we know that the ruling class of the United States never lets a good crisis go to waste. That's what we know. Right? We know that for a fact. There's a whole book on this by Naomi Klein, of all people, called Shock Doctrine, Disaster Capitalism. Naomi Klein wrote an entire book about how the ruling class of the United States never lets a good crisis go to waste, but they always seize the moment, right? After Hurricane Katrina, the Bush administration went into New Orleans and shut down public housing and privatized all kinds of things. There was an ugly quote from a member of Congress, I believe. He said, the government wasn't able to shut down public housing, so God did it for us with Hurricane Katrina. After the fall of the Soviet Union, right? The capitalists, the ruling class, they see a crisis and they use it to push forward their agenda of neoliberalism. This vision of a completely privatized economy where nothing holds back the unlimited power of huge multinational corporations. And it's cooked up in Rockefeller think tanks and the Ford Foundation and the Council on Foreign Relations. They never let a good crisis go to waste. Never do they let a good crisis go to waste. The managerial wing of the ruling class that wants to stay in power, they never let a good crisis go to waste. What's interesting, though, is that Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine and the Rise of Disaster Capitalism, I think that's the title, she focuses on anti-union legislation, privatizations of government industries, but she doesn't point out that in a lot of cases, and this is something that a lot of Marxists, if you want to understand what's going on with Trump right now, a lot of the left is kind of missing things here, is that the ultra-rich, the billionaires, the bankers, Morgan, Carnegie, DuPont, Rockefeller, right? Those folks don't just have an enemy in labor unions and popular power and socialism. They also have an enemy in the lower levels of American capitalism. Right? They also have to contend with the lower levels of capital. They don't like Trump. They don't like Sheldon Adelson. They don't like. Who else do they not like? They don't like the owner of Home Depot. What's his name? What is his name again? Bernie Marcus. They don't like him. They don't like Betsy DeVos, right? She's a billionaire, but she's a billionaire from Tupperware parties, from Amway, and from military contracting, right? No. And the Trump administration, the new right of Europe, a lot of these folks, these are not socialists, definitely not socialists, definitely not working class, but they represent the layers of capital that are being eliminated during this financial crisis. That as capitalism enters a state of crisis, the ability for a middle class and even other elements of the ultra-rich to gain space, goes away. Howard Hughes kind of played this role during the Nixon years, right? He was a big supporter of Nixon, there are people in the ruling class who are just not part of the club, right? They're rich. They own they own big corporations. They own hotel chains. They own fracking companies, frackers. They're the fracking cowboys. Right? The big oil companies hated those guys. There's a lot of people within the ruling class who are not part of the club, right? And that big money has the power, sure, but there are divisions among big money. And I've always maintained that, I haven't always maintained, but I've come to understand through years of careful study and education, Shout out to the Bunker Chan gang. Welcome, welcome. All are welcome here, even Bunker Chan. That there are factions within the U.S. ruling class. You know, there is the ultra rich and the rich, and the divide between the rich and the ultra rich has kind of defined U.S. politics. That the ultra rich have a managerial perspective, and that the rest of the rich, the regular rich, have an entrepreneurial perspective. Most of the rich, the majority of the rich, they just want to make profits, right? They want deregulation. They want things to be privatized. They want the government hands off, and they want to compete, and they want to keep their profits ruling in. But there is a faction that you can call the Eastern establishment, New England old money, bankers and big oil companies, Rockefellers, Morgans, those kind of folks. Those kind of folks have a long-term managerial perspective. They are thinking long-term about how they can stay at the top of the food chain, and they have a very long-term global vision, right? They are very, very, very opposed to optimism in any sense, right? They don't want human history to keep marching forward, because if human history keeps marching forward, that means they will no longer be at the top of the food chain, right? If China continues to rise, if Russia continues to rise, if countries in Africa and Latin America continue to rise up from poverty, eventually they will lose their seat at the center of the global economy. And so they have a pessimistic worldview. They argue there are too many people in the world, that there is too much consumption, and that growth is bad because growth would lead to them being removed. That's the faction at the top. You can call them the slow growth faction, right? During the Obama years, they pushed the concept of slow growth. You can call them the Eastern establishment. That's what they were called in the Republican Party, right? Originally, the Rockefellers were Republicans. And then the John Birch Society and all these right-wing extreme elements that were associated with lower levels of capital, kind of revolted against them and accused the Rockefellers of being communists, accused the Rockefellers of being too left-wing, not libertarian enough. And the Rockefellers and Big Oil were basically pushed out of the Republican Party and into the Democratic Party. And this happened over the course of the 1960s, right? 1964, Barry Goldwater was the Republican candidate for president. And Rockefeller, right, the Rockefeller family, didn't support him, even though they were Republicans. And Rockefeller-linked publications referred to a whiff of fascism coming from Barry Goldwater. They did not like Barry Goldwater. Meanwhile, all the Barry Goldwater supporters were pointing out that the Rockefellers were in favor of birth control, that the Rockefellers were funders of Planned Parenthood, that the Rockefellers had funded the research of Alfred Kinsey, who wrote the Kinsey Report and was an advocate of greater sexual freedom, that the Rockefellers were promoting modern art. And the conservatives in the Republican Party considered the Rockefellers to be too liberal. And the Rockefellers were pushed into the Democratic Party. The Rockefellers campaigned against Richard Nixon in the 1968 election. He won in spite of them. And the Rockefellers very much celebrated the downfall of Richard Nixon when he was impeached, right? These are divisions. And now that Eastern establishment, and this is what, Barry Goldwater, the John Birch Society, all the conservatives referred to when they referred to the Eastern establishment. They were talking about this wing of American capital, old money, entrenched interests that are more liberal and more managerial in their worldview and more Malthusian in their worldview. They really do believe the problem is overpopulation, that if we're going to have social peace, we need to reduce the population. We need to think long-term and strategically about how to beat back geopolitical rivals of American imperialism. That wing of American capital, the Eastern establishment, has been pushed into the Democratic Party reluctantly. Over the course of the 1970s, they were pushed into the Democratic Party. Reagan was very much a revolt against these people. Look, the Carter years were not good years for the United States of America, right? That was a big economic downturn in 1978, big economic downturn, and you had this Eastern establishment running the White House via Jimmy Carter. Almost every person in the Carter administration came out of something called the Trilateral Commission. Do folks know about the Trilateral Commission, right? Zbigniew Brzezinski, Henry Kissinger, all kinds of strategists, right? You had the Club of Rome that put out a document called The Limits to Growth, arguing that growth is bad. This all came out of the Eastern establishment. And Jimmy Carter used his platform as president to urge Americans to reduce their consumption. He used his platform as president to go after the labor Democrats, right? Anyone ever see the movie American Hustle? Ever see American Hustle, right? What steps, all right, if you were president, steps to end got to get a working pen, for Christ's sakes. World exploitation. Alrighty. And have you ever seen American Hustle? Right? It's a dumb movie. It's about a group of criminals or whatever, and they get involved in an FBI sting operation. Because Mark's liberal. They get involved in an FBI sting operation against a member of Congress. Well, it's fictionalized. It's a fictionalized movie. The congressman in it it's not really a real congressman, but it's a fictionalized account of what was called Abscam. Do folks know about Abscam? This was an FBI operation called Arab Scam. And it was during the Carter years. The FBI dressed up a guy like he was a sheik from the Middle East, right? He was a sheik or whatever, and they put him in robes and a head thing, and and he walked around, and pretended to try and bribe government officials. And he targeted inner city politicians who still believed in Roosevelt, right? They called them smokestack Democrats. They called them labor Democrats, and it was guys in New Jersey, guys in Florida, guys in Rust Belt cities, politicians in Rust Belt cities, who tended to be tied to the Teamsters Union, tied to labor unions. Were these guys corrupt? Did these guys do things that might not be good? Perhaps, but that wasn't their crime. Their crime wasn't that they were corrupt. Their crime was that they were tied to the labor unions. These were labor Democrats. They supported nuclear power. They were all about, jobs. Sometimes they were socially conservative, which is interesting. Most of them were Roman Catholic, but they were economically left-wing. They were Roosevelt Democrats, right? They didn't buy into the slow growth, new left stuff. And they set them up. And there was even one case where on videotape, the FBI videoed, this sheikh tried to give this member of Congress a suitcase full of cash, and he pushed the suitcase away, and said, "I don't want it." And they still convicted him. They still managed to convict him. And it was unbelievable. This was the Carter administration, purging the Democratic Party of the pro-labor wing. This happened during the Carter years. This was part of pushing forward this agenda, right? Pushing identity politics, right? Demanding that left-wing activist groups focus on gender, focus on race, and not focus on class struggle. He was pushing forward neoliberalism, deregulating lending, right? Do folks know about this? It used to be that states could have laws. They called them usury laws, laws that restricted how much interest a bank could charge. And it was under Jimmy Carter. He put Paul Volcker in charge of the Federal Reserve, and they overturned that. Congress passed a law, and they overturned all the state usury laws, so that lending of money was not regulated any longer. You read about this, right? This was the Carter administration, and it was great for Rockefeller and for big oil companies, but it devastated the U.S. economy. And Ronald Reagan was this Hollywood movie actor who was a crazy right-wing extremist and anti-communist, and Ronald Reagan's ascendancy was very much the weapons manufacturers who didn't like the military budget being cut, and didn't like his negotiations with the Soviet Union. The SALT Treaty was the weapons manufacturers, the small business owners, rising up against the Eastern establishment, right, and the slow growth policies. And if you listen to the Reagan administration, as disgusting as Reagan's policies were, right, he was an awful president, but there was a tone of optimism in the Reagan White House. Watch his famous ad, "It's morning in America. This day, so many people will get married." Watch that Morning in America ad, right? Ronald Reagan was an awful president, but he represented that lower level of capital, those lower level capitalists who were getting screwed by the no growth faction. I'm convinced that what's going on right now is that, the pandemic is a real thing. People are dying. COVID is real. But there is a division in the ruling class. The lower levels of capital, the restaurant owners, the bar owners, the fracking companies, they are desperate to have the restrictions lifted as fast as they can. But that Eastern establishment, which is now Silicon Valley is like their ace in the hole, right? When they set up Silicon Valley, it was a strategic decision. The Eastern establishment, very much made a strategic decision to push computer technology, and that's a whole nother story I've gotten into. The Eastern establishment is trying to keep locked down as long as they possibly can, right? The Eastern establishment is trying to keep locked down as long as they can. They want to eliminate their competitors. They want a total monopoly, and they want to demolish that lower level of capital, that middle class that could possibly get in their way. That's what's going on here. There is a divide among America's rich. The ultra rich have their agenda, and the lower levels of capital are pushing back against it. And that's what's going on. There's a fight going on, and this is disaster capitalism. This is exactly what Naomi Klein writes about. Except you notice Naomi Klein isn't talking about it now, right? She talked about disaster capitalism. Her book came out in like 2007. No, now Naomi Klein is beating the drum about global warming. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. I am arguing that there is a division among the American ruling class. The pandemic is being used by the ultra-rich, by Bill Gates, by the Rockefellers, by Bezos. Jeff Bezos has made out like a bandit. He's made out like a bandit during this pandemic. The Walton family, Walmart, they've made out like a bandit, right? And I am convinced, socialism in conservative states, I am convinced that that's what we're seeing here, and that the ultra rich are trying to get as much out of this and as much securing of their monopoly as they can. And they're also trying to figure out how much they can get away with restricting civil liberties, right? I mean, they're trying to think about, okay, in the name of the pandemic, we've outlawed public gatherings. In the name of the pandemic, we've required everyone to wear a mask, and a lot of this is necessary for public health reasons, but they're experimenting. They're seeing how far they can go with this. We know that, right? Of course they're going to do it. Just like after 9/11. Folks, remember after 9/11, how the Patriot Act was, boom, right, signed into law? Do you remember that? How they didn't let a moment go to waste? They swung into action right after 9/11. They invaded Iraq, a country that had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11. Do you remember that? Yeah, I do. These folks never let a disaster go to waste. And you're being naive. You're being very, very naive to think that they don't. If you think that anyone who suspects that there's any agenda behind anything is just an evil right-winger, I'm sorry. Get over that. I am deeply annoyed by Marxists and socialists jumping onto partisan narratives. Look, folks, I just told you there what was really going on with Ronald Reagan. I hate Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan supported Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan to fight against the Soviet Union and to fight against the People's Democratic Party. Ronald Reagan supported the Contra terrorists in Nicaragua to try and violently overthrow the Sandinistas and kill hundreds of thousands of people. I am no fan of Ronald Reagan. And the right wing, when they eulogize Ronald Reagan, they're overlooking mass murder. I mean, this guy was tied to drug cartels in Latin America with the Contras. He was tied to Al-Qaeda-like terror groups in Afghanistan. He was a bloodthirsty imperialist. Ronald Reagan was no good. Shortages. Ronald Reagan was no good in U.S. healthcare. But I'm telling you, there was a division in the U.S. ruling class, and that Carter represented that slow growth Eastern establishment. Meanwhile, Reagan represented kind of an upsurge against Jimmy Carter, primarily by the military-industrial complex, but also by small business owners, etc. This is how this stuff works, right? It's more simple than people might think. Mouse for the policy. So it's more complicated than people might think, right? There's nuance to these kind of things. So that's what I wanted to say. That's really what I wanted to say. I wanted to kind of get out there what's going on because it sucks, right? This is going to be an awful holiday. I'm getting sick of this. You're getting sick of this, right? I mean, well, there's a vaccine. We're supposed to be optimistic about the vaccine. People have got their concerns about the vaccine. Look, I want us to get out of this. I disapprove of Donald Trump. He's been an awful president. He's been an awful president, absolutely awful president. But I see Biden. If you want to know who's behind Joe Biden, right? It's getting close to the holiday time. Give the gift of my book on Kamala Harris. I talk all about the Eastern establishment. I talk about the Hillary Clinton State Department. I talk about Silicon Valley. And, hey, before I go to our open discussion, why don't we just talk briefly about how, what better gift would there be for a relative than my book on Kamala Harris? Or you got that libertarian relative who would see this title and just lose their mind, Getting Rich Without Capitalism. A longtime favorite book of mine, Getting Rich Without Capitalism. I wrote this book. I actually wrote this book. The title was designed. I envisioned in my mind this book being on a shelf and a libertarian going through the bookstore and seeing Getting Rich Without Capital. You can't do that! And just having their head explode seeing the title. That's why I made it Getting Rich Without Capitalism. That's why I gave it the title. I'm messing with the conservative mind. And I wrote Getting Rich Without Capitalism, right? America's Way Out. And many people love this book. Many people say this is like their gateway drug. I mean, there's a lot of fans of me that read this and they said, whoa, like, this changed how they saw everything. It was a complete reorientation of their mindset. So, think about that. And of course, there's the masterpiece, City Builders and Vandals. So, think about giving the gift of revolutionary literature around the holiday time. Always something to do. Money in politics. Money in politics. Much respect from Greece. Well, much respect to you, right? We all are watching the Greek workers and their history of militancy and struggle. So that's great. So yeah, my books are online, available wherever books are sold. A number of bookstores have them in stock now. I've been getting orders from various bookstores. So, always worth considering doing that. Folks, I'm enjoying myself. I'm sitting here. I'm seeing reports about the world further going to hell. I'm, exercising from home. I think the gyms might still be open, but I wouldn't count on it. And it's probably best to just exercise from home. So I've been doing those, exercise, apartment-safe, quiet exercises that you can do. There you go. I follow you. You have the beautiful woman on the screen, and she shows you how to jump and left punch and right punch and jumping jacks and that's how I've been exercising from home, trying to not just get completely lazy this time of year. And we're just trying to get through this, right? We're trying to all get through this. I got plenty of unnamed orange beverage. My wife watches a lot of television in Spanish, which I don't understand. I need to learn to speak Spanish. And my wife entertains herself by doing arts and crafts. She's really into arts and crafts. I am trying to just spend my time well. I go to work, my office, we're media, we're essential. So that's something to do. And we're just going to get through this. It looks like we're at lockdown number 2. So, did I miss a super chat here? Let's go back. Let's make sure I didn't miss a super chat. Everyone who super chats me, do you consider authoritarianism versus libertarianism a false dichotomy? Okay. Authoritarianism versus libertarianism, false dichotomy. We'll address that. Alrighty. So, folks, we're just doing the best we can. We're getting through everything, and we're keeping it real. We're staying alive. We're fighting the good fight. I was blown away that so many people on Jimmy Dore were demanding that I go on that show. I hope I hear from him soon. I'd always love to go on Jimmy Dore's show. Big fan of his, and the way they went after him is pretty awful. I'm working on a new book. I think I mentioned this, but I am now working on a book about Silicon Valley fascism. I've done a lot of research in the last few months about Silicon Valley, its origins, the ideologies and beliefs of Silicon Valley. And so I've decided that it needs to be a book. There's a book in this. There's a full-length book. It'll probably be out in a few months. That's the next book waiting. It'll be Silicon Valley fascism. So keep your eyes out for that. I'll be doing the research, and yeah, we're having a great night. And we're just going to keep talking on here. Yeah, I mean, it's cold outside, but it's warm inside. Yeah, and we're just going to keep doing what we can do. I see someone says they like my book on the history of the U.S. Communist Party. That's the text of a class I gave on the history of the Communist Party USA. It's available on various online book dealers. Just check it out. I made a point of including a lot of historical documents in the book, a lot of neat photographs and actual texts from the Communist Party from various times throughout their history. It's a favorite. Dakota Lilly, good friend of everything we do here, my good friend Dakota Lilly. He not only did he like the book, he actually made a video review of the book. And it was popular, and he got a lot out of the book. He read it cover to cover. He really got a lot out of it. It's a favorite. A lot of people, that book on the Communist Party. So check it out, and that's available as well. Don't have one to hold up on the screen at the moment. It's in the other room, but yeah. So yeah, folks, hey, we're just doing what we can always do. We're just doing what we always do. We're living our lives. We're trying to get through it. I will be here for you. I'm not going anyplace, right? Unless a meteorite strikes my house, or I get struck by lightning, or the government decides to indefinitely detain me and torture me within an inch of my life. Barring exceptional circumstances, hey, I'll be talking to you, because there's nothing I like more than talking to you in our community here. We have a very special bond. Let's be real about it. We have a very special bond. There's something special about this community. We may not be as big as other online communities, but you pay attention to these other online communities. There's a lot of people who will watch certain people on the web, but they're all kind of hate watching them, right? There's so many people on the web, not to name names. There are certain people on the web who sit there. This is your typical Bernie Krat YouTuber. They sit there, these corporations have too much power. Bleepity bleep, 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 mother bleepin', bleepin', they're mother bleepin'. These bleepin' corporations are, these right-wingers are bleeping racist. These bleeping mother fucking bleeping. They sit there and they just cuss up a storm about corporate, and it's just standard liberal talking points, and they're cussing up a storm. Bleepity bleep, can you bleeping believe how much bleeping power? They sit there and they just cuss up a storm about whatever liberals are supposed to be mad about this week. And it all has kind of a fake quality to it. Have you noticed that? There's a lot of that. I mean, it's just, guys my age or younger, they sit there on their computers and they cuss up a storm about whatever, liberals have been assigned to be mad about this week. And, and that's supposed to be entertaining. I mean, we do something better here. There's a deeper level of analysis here. We understand things a lot more. Right? A lot more. I mean, we give a much deeper level of analysis. Look, I'm mad about the stuff liberals are mad about too, right? I mean, look, I talked about that awful report about the Vice Squad of the New York City Police Department. That's intense. That is really intense. The New York City Police Department Vice Squad. Right? And the way they're operating. I've talked about that. And I'll talk about it. I mean, liberals are right about the prison industrial complex. I'm glad. That used to be a thing only communists talked about. Did you know that? Angela Davis, communist. Well, now people know about the prison industrial complex. Great. That's excellent. Right? And Black Lives Matter and police brutality. I mean, I was in Cleveland. I used to go to court with police brutality victims. I had the honor and privilege of working with Black Lives, or what was it called? It was called Black on Black Crime Incorporated, which is an activist group in Cleveland, headed by Art McCoy. They do great work in Cleveland, and the issue of police brutality for a long time, most of America, most of white America wouldn't touch it. But, I mean, I'm glad that liberals are paying attention to that issue for once. I'm glad, You shouldn't be mad. Just, liberals do good stuff, right? Liberals tend to be more open to criticisms of U.S. society that communists have. The problem with liberals is that they don't, they don't really oppose the system. And in a lot of ways, their argument is simply that they could run capitalism more efficiently, right? And those of us with a socialist perspective, we're different. We are not liberals, right? Marxists, revolutionaries, we are not liberals. We don't support imperialism, right? Thank you for the super chat, Constantine. We don't support imperialism. We don't support the capitalist system. We don't want to make it better. We want a whole new society where the banks, factories, and industries and major centers of economic power are organized to serve public good and not for profits. Would I interview Nathan Rich? Of course I would interview Nathan Rich. I admire Nathan Rich a lot. I've quoted Nathan Rich. He's a great person. He does great work. I bought City Builders and Vandals in Our Age for my pops for Christmas. I have the Green Book with your intro. Lovely, of course. I don't have a question. Just wanted to say your voice is important. Well, thank you, Red Sea Socialist. I'm really glad you appreciate my voice. Like I said, I ain't going anywhere, barring, acts of God or man. I'm here. I'm here with you. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing. So on that note, folks, that wasn't exactly an epic speech, but that's okay. We're just chatting. We're just keeping it real. We're just having conversation. On that note, folks, why don't we do our names and locations? I'll call you out as I see you after I take a big drink of unnamed orange beverage. What do you think of Professor Steve Keen? I've never heard of Professor Steve Keen. I don't think anything about him because I've never heard of him. Australia, Athens, Greece, Peter, Henderson, Nevada. Donated. San Diego, Salud. Australia, Brisbane. Ryan in Oakland, California. Mo in Toronto, Canada. Max the Sax in Virginia. Kalimantan, Los Angeles, San Diego. Washington, USA. Bendigo, Australia, David Fox, good friend of our program here. I think he and Dust James are doing something later tonight, so you should check that out. Nowhere particular. Utah, Pacific Northwest. Jay from the UK. Chicago. Tim Stacy in Kentucky. Kendall in San Diego. Bulgaria. Chris in Canada. Nevada Burner. Nassau County, New York. Kieran from San Diego. Allende, Mexico. Ben, you almost got me there. Seattle, Bergen, Norway. Denmark, Austin, Texas. Chirac, Norway. Or Chirac, right? Chirac, right? That's like Chicago. That's when the people started getting killed there. First, I thought Jacques Chirac, but no, it's Chirac, right? And that's referred to the murders in Chicago. Joey in Belize. Albuquerque. Dave in Madison, Wisconsin. Clarksville in Tennessee. Dan from Pennsylvania, Mohsen from Iran, Michigan, Cleveland Pirate Alex, Cowboy Comrade in Houston, Union, Juan from Mexico, Lloyd Bennett from Queens, New York, Auckland, New Zealand, Alabama, Justice A, Sydney, Australia, Michael in Ithaca, New York, Hamilton, Canada, Liverpool, UK, Shaw from Maryland, Netherlands in lockdown, Mikey in Philadelphia, in Philadelphia, Montsylvania. Is that a joke? I don't get the joke, but that's okay. Dust says, myself and Dust are going live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, well, have fun with that, right? If we're still going at that time, I'll keep going, but if not, I'll shut down and then I'll listen to you. Sam from Cleveland Wasteland, Frankfurt, Germany, Shanghai, China, Aaron Huang. Very good. Venus, Chicago, Cleveland, Las Vegas, baby. Long Live the Victory of People's War. That's a book by Lynn Biao. Alberta, Canada. Virginia. Plymouth, United Kingdom. Matt in Tasmania. Wow. Anna Kasparian is a neocon. All right. I thought this was Anna Kasparian listening, but it was listening from a place called Is a Neocon. Sham, Cleveland Wasteland. Little Falls. Sedonia. Flushing, Queens. Very good. Pennsylvania. H. Sullivan in Florida. Dante from SoCal. SoCal, so red. Very good. Kentucky, KY. Leipzig, East Germany, Etatist. Very good. Lex in the Netherlands. Right? Shout out to Lexington, DSA. Well, there you go. Thanks from Tim Stacy. Very good. What else is new? Anyone else? Southeast UK, Hamburg, Germany. Loved your CNN video, Caleb. Oh, thank you, Harold. CPI in Spain. Well, not that I'm aware of, but there you go. There you go. Google tax haven, Ireland. Ha ha ha. Right. Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Oh boy, don't throw me in the lion's den. All righty. Very good. Houston, we have a problem. All right. Albany, New York, Lawrence Chu, longtime friend of the program. Very good. Glad to see you. Glad to see you. Oh boy, folks. Asheville, North Carolina. Glad to have you in the house, Asheville. Young radical Caleb is a mood. A mood. I don't know what that means. Detroit, California, Campbell, California. Let's get going then. All righty. All righty, folks. Another thing I just wanted to throw out there and mention. Johannesburg, South Africa, right? Melbourne, Australia. A mood is like a vibe. All right. And a vibe is like an atmosphere. All right. But I wanted to mention St. Louis, Missouri. I am going to go on somebody's podcast on Monday. And this is not a good person politically, not where I'm at all. And I'm going to make that abundantly clear. But, you know, this person, and you'll hear about it probably on Monday. This person, I'm going to go on their podcast. They're not a good person, right? Politically, they're not where I'm at all. They think some things that I feel are vehemently repugnant. But, you know, I got on there. I got invited on there, I should say. And I thought for a moment, right? Because you all now have seen the video of my CNN appearance, right? If I can go on CNN, right, the voice of American imperialism, the network that paved the way for killing, you know, hundreds of thousands, if not millions in Libya, killing people in Iraq, killing people in Syria. If I can go on CNN, a network that is the voice of empire, that runs propaganda for the imperialists, you know, and has blood on its hands. If I can go on CNN, then I can go on a show of somebody with some not good right-wing views and pretty bad views, right? I can do that. And that's the thing, is it's like, you know, I don't want to be like the people I criticize. I've long pointed out to people that you know, you know, if this cancel culture is applied fairly, Biden, CNN, DNC, Kamala Harris would never survive. But it's not applied fairly, right? It's applied to dissident elements, right? So somebody who is a dissident element on the far right has invited me to go on their podcast, and I will make clear that I do not agree with their views, and that's fine. And I don't have a moral problem with that. And I will probably stonewall if they try to press me to talk about certain topics, because that's not who I'm at. But you folks, I've debated other leftists like Vosh. I debated Stefan Molyneux, who is very racist individual and just reprehensible in a lot of ways. I debated Eric Stryker, the white supremacist, and this other, was it Michael Enoch, who was a white supremacist. I debated against them. I debated against Augustus Sol Invictus. I debated against Destiny. I will debate right-wingers, right? So some right-winger has invited me on their podcast, and I'm going to go on there, and I'm going to offer no support to their racism, no support to their anti-Semitism, and I am going to, you know, give my viewpoint, just like I would do if I was on CNN. If I can go on CNN, which has literal blood of empire on its hands, I can go on the podcast of somebody who has never killed anyone, who just has some views that I consider repugnant. And that's my attitude, right? If I am willing to go on CNN, if I am willing to go on Fox, then I can go on the podcast of some, you know, far-right, you know, guy. So that's my attitude, right? And if you think that makes me a reprehensible person, if you think that because I go on the podcast of somebody right-wing, that makes me a bad guy, well, then I'm not for you, right? That's all I can say, right? If you think that I endorsed American imperialism by going on CNN, you're wrong. If you think that I'm endorsing this man's views by going on his podcast to talk about my Kamala Harris book, well, then you're wrong, right? And that's generally how I do it, right? I would say the same thing on CNN that I would say on this guy's podcast. I would answer their questions with the same honesty. So, that's my attitude, right? I will engage with people on the far right. I will engage with people on the pseudo left. I'll engage with people on the real left, right? And not everyone I've ever talked to or debated against or gone on their show do I agree with. And that is how these things work. So, you know, that is my policy. I generally, if I get an invitation, I usually take it. If someone invites me on their podcast, I usually take it. Sometimes if it doesn't look good to me, if it looks like it's something if it stinks, right? It smells bad. If it looks like a setup, right? Or it looks like something that just wouldn't be a good use of my time, I'll decline. Okay? But for the most part, if somebody invites me on their podcast, I'll do it. Right? I'll do it. So someone invites me on their podcast, I'll do it. Somebody invited me on their podcast, someone in Indiana, and I'll do it. I'll go on there, and I'm not going to support anything that this guy says about other issues, but he wants to talk to me about my book on Kamala Harris, and I will do it. And, hey, I haven't noticed Rachel Maddow inviting me on her show to talk about the book. I haven't noticed, the Jacobin podcast inviting me on there to talk about it. So if these people want to have me on there to talk about the same ideas I would talk about on their podcast, I would do that, right? And that's my policy, right? I will engage. I will try to get my message out in different places. That's how it works. The other thing I wanted to mention is the Center for Political Innovation, CPI, is on fire. We had a great Zoom call this afternoon. Shout out to Justin Simons, great organizer out in Los Angeles. Shout out to everyone who was on, right? And we are actually going to have our next web conference a week from tomorrow. It'll be December 27th. We will have our next web conference, and we are actually going to have speakers from India. Speakers most likely from the Communist Party of India Marxist will be on our Zoom conference call. That is awesome in my book. That is really, really awesome in my book. So no shame in that, right? I think that's great. So they will be on, and it's going to be good. We're going to have an amazing Zoom conference. It'll be streamed on this channel. You can watch it. And there you go. Be sure to tune in to our web conference a week from tomorrow, December 27th. That'll be fun. Be sure to tune in. So good times, folks. Good times. So now I start answering your super chats, and keep them coming in, folks. The longer I get super chats, the longer we're on here. Alrighty. First question was about unemployment councils. What do I think of unemployment councils? The unemployment councils were one of the best things that the Communist Party of the United States ever did. People were hungry and starving during the Great Depression. The Communist Party used the slogan, "Don't starve, fight." They built these associations of unemployed people. They led them to fight off the bailiffs and stop evictions. They led them to go to City Hall and confront elected officials and demand relief. They organized a huge, massive demonstration on March 6th, 1931, called International Unemployment Day, that shook New York City. And it was the hungry people being heard, and it was tremendous. It was tremendous organizing that the Communist Party did. Everybody was in awe of what the Communist Party accomplished. The Socialist Party formed their own unemployment councils to try and catch up. Trotskyites, everyone was panicking because the Communist Party, a group of tankies, was doing amazing Marxist-Leninist work with the unemployment councils. The early 1930s, that was what the Communist Party did. That was their mass organization, and it was very successful. The unemployment councils that were staged hunger marches, they did amazing stuff. Read about it. There's a very good book about the hunger marches in Britain called Unemployed Struggles by Wall Hallington. And it describes the unemployment councils in Britain and how the unemployed coal miners of Scotland marched all the way down from Scotland to Britain. They had huge, huge marches of unemployed coal miners. And they would march from city to city demanding relief for the coal miners Amazing stuff, right? The communists did amazing organizing in Britain, in the United States, organizing among the unemployed, demanding unemployment insurance, demanding relief for the unemployed. There's a famous photo of a group of communists marching, and the sign said, "Work or riot," meaning if you don't provide us with relief, we will revolt. Amazing stuff. They would go to Washington, D.C. and set up encampments, and communists would organize thousands of hungry, unemployed people to just set up in Washington, D.C. and refuse to leave and confront elected officials. It was amazing organizing during the Great Depression. Amazing stuff. The unemployed councils, that was one of the greatest achievements of the Communist Party. So my hope is that something like that, a movement of the unemployed, could once again happen. Global reset. Well, the global reset is kind of what I talked about on here. I think that the ultra-rich, the Silicon Valley fascists, the Eastern establishment, the slow growth faction is going to secure its monopoly. And I think they're using the pandemic to do that. No question about it. And I guess, and I talked about this. I went on the podcast of, what was his name? Frank Analysis. I think I went on Frank Analysis, and, we talked about this. And, the global reset is a real thing. It's not the Illuminati, and it's not the thing high up on the thing, and it's not, proof that COVID is a secret government conspiracy. The actual, thing called the global reset, that is an effort by the richest of the rich to try and restructure the economy. And it includes things like global warming, et cetera. But it's restructuring the economy post-pandemic. All right. What would I do if I were president to stop third world exploitation? One, I would immediately sign the Belt and Road, number one. Two, I would nationalize. I would make oil and all natural resources in the United States public property, right? So first of all, I would join China's efforts to start building infrastructure in the developing world. Two, I would nationalize the energy so that no more was energy operated in order to make profits. No more oil for profit, no more natural gas for profit. Coal, timber, anything that is a natural resource would be operated by the state, and the revenue from it would go into the state, and we would manage it with state central planning. That would eliminate the big oil monopolies and their drive for global dominance. So that's another step that I would take. Another thing is I would bring the military bases home, right? We don't need soldiers all over the world. Why do we have military bases all overseas, right? All these military bases surrounding Iran in the Middle East, all these, these fleets threatening Latin America, all these U.S. troops all over Africa. I'd bring the troops home, and I would put them to work rebuilding the United States, using that resources to build up the United States. That's what I would do. The other things that I would do is I would start making American corporations and American universities start doing partnerships with Chinese universities and with universities in Russia and with universities in Venezuela. Another thing that I would do is I would lift the criminal sanctions on anti-imperialist states, on countries like Cuba and Venezuela and Iran and Syria and elsewhere. It's just a few things I would do to end the exploitation of the third world. What else? What else would I do? Again, I would put American energy companies under public property, start having them engage in joint ventures with the state-run energy companies of other countries. You have to understand that it's about economics. There's an economic root to all of this. And by dismantling the global system of monopoly capitalism, that is how you end imperialism. Leave NATO. You're asking me what I would do. Again, I'm telling you steps that could be taken that would certainly end the exploitation of the third world, right? Alrighty. Was Marx a liberal? In what sense? Okay, right? So in the sense, liberalism refers to the ideology that came out of the Enlightenment, out of the struggle to bring down feudalism, right? This idea, this belief in individual rights. To some degree or other, Marx was a liberal. He believed in religious freedom. I believe he believed in freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. But his philosophy, in a lot of ways, is illiberal, right? There's a lot of talk, Moscow trials. There's a lot of talk, Simone Bolivar, all right. There's a lot of talk about illiberalism, nowadays, right? And it's this belief that societies are no longer free and open. They're moving in a direction where, the state is in control of the economy, God forbid, or free market, corporations can't just do whatever they want. Well, Marx was illiberal in that sense. I mean, Marx did believe that people should think in a collective way, right? He was for workers of the world unite, not workers of the world be individuals and do your own thing. Workers of the world unite, right? He was for a working class government, the dictatorship of the proletariat, right? He was, Marx, even though he came out of the bourgeois revolutions, he argued that a new ideology and a new period was needed. So Marx was very illiberal in a sense, but he was heavily influenced by the French Revolution. He was heavily influenced by the liberalism of the 1848 German Revolution. Um, what was the the super chat was Moscow trials, and what was the last super chat? Oh, Simon Bolivar. All right, Simone Bolivar. All right, so yeah, that's my attitude on that. I think Marx was illiberal, but he was heavily influenced by liberalism when it was in birth, when it was the new ideology. So there you go. Socialism in conservative states. Well, look, I mean, the issue is an economic one, right? And that, many people that live in very conservative states, shout out to Metches, the fantastic and professional nanny. Many people who live in conservative states are economically suffering right now. And socialism could really, really, really benefit, their lives. They could really have their lives improve because of socialism. Um, so, if we can make economic arguments, if socialism stops being Venezuela, if socialism stops being a simply a cultural struggle, right? And that's the problem, is that these synthetic leftists have made socialism into a cultural struggle, where it's, we seem like we're trying to destroy people's religions, we seem like we're trying to destroy people's loyalty to their country or make their community into chaos. Socialism needs to be understood. We're trying to economically improve your life by having the economy controlled by society overall and getting rid of the free market and the rule of profits. I think a lot of those folks could be won over to it. A lot of people that are conservative would be open to socialism if socialism was not presented as a culture war against them. And so that's one thing that needs to be said. Shortage in U.S. healthcare. Look, the whole U.S. healthcare system is a disaster. It's a free market mess. It's profits for corporations, and it's an absolute disaster. It is an absolute disaster in so many ways. Mao's foreign policy. Well, in the final years of Mao's life, right, and during the period where the Gang of Four came into ascendancy, right? So you have to remember the Cultural Revolution started in 1966. Lin Biao, was kind of the main representative of Mao Zedong, launched the Cultural Revolution. After the Cultural Revolution, after the January Storm, there was a disagreement between Mao Zedong and Lin Biao, right? In a city called Shanghai, you had the Communist Party being overthrown by this workers' council type thing. And Lin Biao, the general who Mao had backed, who had started the Cultural Revolution along with Mao, supported the January Storm, whereas Mao did not. Mao did not favor creating communes. Instead, he favored what he called the he called it the 3-in-1 combination rather than the commune states, right? That the Cultural Revolution had been pushing for the commune states. Lin Biao had been for the Shanghai commune or commune states. So Mao didn't agree. He was in favor of what he called the 3-in-1 combination. And so after that, eventually Lin Biao disappears and is killed in a plane crash. It's a very strange story. After that, the main leaders of China, with Mao's blessing, were the Gang of Four. Would you go on Paul Morin's show? I don't know who Paul Morin is. I would probably go on his show. Like I said, I'm going to go on this very right-wing guy's show, so why wouldn't I? The Gang of Four came into ascendancy. The first sign that China's foreign policy was going in a pro-U.S. direction was in Angola, where China started arming and supporting UNITA, which was this CIA-backed counter gang that was trying to fight against the MPLA, the Movement for the People's Liberation of Angola, the Marxist party that was fighting the Portuguese. China started supporting UNITA, which was this CIA counter gang that was fighting them. But then, you'll have to remember Richard Nixon went to China and was given a big parade, in China and was welcomed as a hero. China supported and had relations with Pinochet in Chile to the point that the Revolutionary Communist Party of Chile, which was a Maoist party, actually wrote a letter to China and said, "What's the deal? I mean, he's persecuting us. How can you support Pinochet?" China was friendly to Haile Selassie in Ethiopia, who was the U.S.-backed dictator of Ethiopia. China was friendly to the Shah of Iran, and that China, in the name of fighting the Soviet Union, started being very, very anti-Soviet, and they put forward what they called the theory of three worlds. They also put forward this doctrine of the main danger. So the theory of three worlds, China argued that there was the first world countries, which was the United States and the Soviet Union. Then there was the second world, which was Europe, and then there was the third world. And the third world was the part of the world that had revolutionary potential. They argued the Soviet Union was imperialist, the United States is imperialist, the European countries are just kind of in between, and that then there's the third world, right? And that China was going to lead the third world. And so that on that basis, they started supporting a lot of like pro-U.S., regimes in the Middle East, small businesses. They started supporting a lot of pro-U.S. regimes in the Middle East, in Africa, and Asia and other places, small businesses and socialism. On that basis. And actually, the Gang of Four predicted that there would be a nuclear war, and that half of humanity would die, but China would come out as the leader. As after the nuclear war between the USA and the Soviet Union happened, then China would come out on top. That was nuts, right? And the Gang of Four were ultra-left and insane. And they were collaborating with the U.S. imperialists. They were making arguments like China should stay poor. At one point, they wanted to start manufacturing colored televisions, and they argued that color televisions were inherently bourgeois, decadent, or something, and that the Gang of Four were crazed ultra-left extremists. They were toppled, and Deng Xiaoping came to power, and that was a good moment. Deng Xiaoping's foreign policy was problematic as well. But yeah, I mean, unfortunately, because of the Sino-Soviet split, China was kind of forced into a situation. It took about a decade, from 1961, when the Sino-Soviet split happened, all the way up until about 1969, 1970. China was trying to be more revolutionary and more anti-imperialist than the Soviet Union. But after a while, China had been so isolated, and they'd suffered so much because the Soviet Union had isolated them from the global communist movement, that as a result of that, China, got into a situation where it was aligning with the U.S. imperialists, right? The three worlds theory and the doctrine of the main danger. China declared that the main danger to humanity was the Soviet Union, right? This, what they called the Soviet social imperialists, were the main danger to humanity, and that was absolutely wrong. And that's that's funny that all these people that are like Maoists, they want to pretend this didn't happen. Right? They wanted to pretend everything bad in China all started with Deng Xiaoping. No, this was all the Mao years. It was Mao who embraced Nixon. It was Mao who supported Pinochet. It was Mao's China I'm just telling you, folks, that, yes, Mao was a great revolutionary, but he took some opportunist moves in the final years of his life. I mean, he was very old, and it was the Gang of Four that were really running things. They were ultra-left, and they were keeping China from developing, and they were aligning with the imperialists in the name of ultra-leftism. They were acting like Trotskyites, and, that happened, right? And they threw big parades for Haile Selassie and U.S.-backed dictators. They didn't support revolutionaries around the world, in Latin America and other places that were struggling against imperialism. This happened, right? And you can't deny that it happened, right? That China's bad foreign policy in the 70s is a reality. Trying to order U.S. Communist book, I can only find on Amazon. I think it cannot ship in Canada. Can you put it on Abe Books? Oh, I'll have to look into that. I've never put a book up on Abe Books. I know some of my books are on Abe Books, but I didn't know that was the case. Money in politics. It's funny. I had a friend who said that liberals say they want to take money out of politics, but actually it's communists who want to put money and class struggle and struggles around economics into politics. I thought that was kind of a clever way of putting things. But, that's a liberal talking point, money out of politics. And they're right, that our government officials are bought and paid for by big corporations and, and that the way that things work with super PACs and political action committees and, the way things are working, it's, politicians very much serve the 1%, the people with the money, right? That's a reality. And liberals are aware of that. And no, it did not start with Citizens United. It's always been that way. That's the story of U.S. history. Big corporations rule, right? That's just a fact. Is DSA controlled opposition? All right, I'll write that down. Is DSA controlled opposition? And that's always been that way. It's called capitalism. So the liberal, like, money out of politics thing is a little bit naive. But is what they're saying correct? Are they pointing to the reality that big corporations own politicians? Yes, they are. All right, authoritarianism versus libertarianism is a false dichotomy. Well, I made a whole video rethinking human rights and all of that because, yes, when societies are stable and prosperous, they tend to have a lot more civil liberties. And when societies are under attack, when societies are unstable, when there's lots of poverty, they tend to be very authoritarian, right? And that people make it sound like liberalism, libertarianism and authoritarianism are like wills, right? Some countries want to be free, some countries don't. There's good countries where people have freedom. There's bad countries where people don't have freedom. No, I mean, that's not the reality, right? There's an economic base underlying this, that no one in the world started talking about freedom of speech or freedom of assembly until like the 1400s in Europe. And the reason for that was because there had not reached that level of economic development. Go back and watch that video I did about rethinking human rights, because the way we understand this, the way we're brought up in the West to understand the concept of freedom is very, very naive, very, very naive. All right, the Moscow trials. Well, trials happened in the Soviet Union. Zinoviev, Kamenev, Bukharin, a number of leaders of the Bolshevik Party were accused of having plotted against Stalin and against the Soviet leadership in cooperation with Japan and Nazi Germany. I really don't know enough about it. What I do know is that to think that there weren't people in the Soviet government that were compromised, to think that there weren't people in the Soviet Union that were, working for, the foreign capitalists or the fascists, that would be extremely naive, right? There was a lot of sabotage that went on. There was Sergei Kirov, right, who was assassinated, and that there were very clearly in the Soviet Union, there was a fifth column. There was a group of people that were trying to undermine socialism. Now, to what extent, were these confessions from Bukharin and Zinoviev and others, were they legit? I don't know, right? I don't know enough about it, right? I do know there probably were conspirators to some degree trying to undermine the Soviet Union. Why wouldn't there be, right? As is pointed out, the imperialists, the French spend millions of dollars to spy on the Americans spend millions of dollars to spy on the British spend millions of dollars to spy on the Germans. The imperialists are always spying on each other, so why would they not spy on a socialist country? Right? Why would there not be, right, to think that there wouldn't be some kind of fifth column or some kind of, underground anti-government apparatus in the Soviet Union would be extremely naive. That said, these are high-ranking leaders, Zinoviev, right, Kamenev, Bukharin. They said they were in league with Trotsky. I don't know about it. They did confess, but then many people argue their confessions were made under duress, right? They had been... I don't know what happened, all right? I do know what's crazy is that a lot of Americans did watch those trials. A lot of, like the U.S. ambassador, Joseph Davies, he attended the trials. He thought it was legit. There were a lot of Americans who attended those trials and thought they were legit, Now, we all like to pretend that didn't happen. We all like to pretend, oh, no, everyone knew it was evil Stalin all along. Well, why were so many very prominent Americans in the audience of those trials, Americans who spoke Russian, hearing what happened and convinced that that it was a legit trial? So, I don't know if it was a legit trial or not, right? I don't know if Zinoviev and Bukharin and Kamenev, if they really did what they were accused of doing or what they confessed to doing. I don't know. I don't know if they did it or not. I do know that period, the period following the Moscow trials in the Soviet Union, was a period of great fear and terror. Yezhov, Shina, and a lot of innocent people did get rounded up and sent to prison camps and accused of crimes. And that was awful. All right, the period following the Moscow trials, the Great Terror, was a very awful period. And eventually, the leader of the secret police, Yezhov, was executed for what he did during the Great Terror. He was executed. He was given the death penalty for what he did because all of Soviet society was kind of in a panic. So I don't really know. At the end of the day, I don't know. My admiration for the Soviet Union, my defense of the Soviet Union is not based on a belief that no innocent person was ever killed. It's not based on a belief that every person who was ever sent to a gulag deserved it, because that's not true. There were many people who should not have been in gulags. There were many people who suffered political repression that was unjust. There was corruption in the Soviet Union. There was political repression that was not right. My support for the Soviet Union is that they achieved real economic miracles without capitalism. They took a society that was deeply impoverished and they made it a global superpower. They invented space travel. They fully industrialized. They wiped out unemployment. They wiped out illiteracy. They defeated the Nazi invaders. They made some of the best. They did cutting-edge breakthroughs in film with Sergei Eisenstein. They did cutting-edge breakthroughs in gymnastics. They did cutting-edge breakthroughs in music with Shostakovich. After, 15 countries invaded them after the Russian Revolution. The country was devastated, but they went from that to being a global industrial superpower, a really powerful modern country that did amazing things. That is really important. And they did it led by the revolutionary science of Marxism-Leninism. And they did it without a free market capitalist system. And that means that we should study it and we should learn from it. And that I am sick and tired of being told, I've been told my whole life, socialism never worked anywhere. That's a big, fat, ugly lie. And Soviet history is smoking gun proof that that's a big, fat, ugly lie, right? And I'm so sick of leftists who hear this big, fat, ugly lie, socialism never worked, and they go, oh, that's true, because they're wimps, because they're cowards. Oh, I don't want to be associated with Stalin. No one's asking you to say Stalin did nothing wrong. No one's asking you to say that there weren't, Green New Deal. No one's asking you to say that there weren't bad things that were done. No one's asking you to say life was perfect. But when you say socialism never worked anywhere, that is so obviously false that having the banks, factories, and industries controlled by the people, having state central planning and control of the means of production does work. And when socialists refuse to say that, when they go along with this big ugly lie, I have no tolerance for that, because the reason that people in the United States oppose socialism is not because of people, thinking that Stalin killed people. People oppose socialism because they've been told their whole life socialism never worked anywhere, and that's very, very easily refuted. More Americans will die from COVID than World War II. Dems and Jacobins will wake around for the perfect moment. Okay, right. All right. Dems, Jacobins, M for all. All right. Okay, so Simón Bolívar. Simón Bolívar is the national hero of Venezuela, of Bolivia, which is named after him. Should the USA emulate your America? Simón Bolívar, he's the national hero of South America. He's the liberator of South America. He defeated the Spanish, and he opposed slavery, and he was a national hero and a progressive, right? Bolívar. That's who he is, and he has a lasting legacy. They have his picture up in the Venezuelan National Assembly. The right-wing opposition took his picture down. He's seen as a populist, as a champion of the common people. He had socialistic ideas, and he was a progressive and a fighter for the people. Yeah, Simón Bolívar, great. Who's responsible for the situation in Venezuela? Well, obviously, it's the USA that has put horrendous sanctions on Venezuela, which has prevented them from participating in the international markets, which has prevented, Venezuela from developing independent industries. When Venezuela's it's got an economy centered around oil. And then if the USA manipulates the oil markets, which it does, and then on top of that, the USA makes it so they can't import food, and then messes with their ability to get dollars and the food importers. Yeah, the crisis in Venezuela was made by the United States. And I'm so sick of people saying that everything wrong with Venezuela, oh, socialism just doesn't work, right? Many people admit that up until 2014, they were having tremendous economic successes with socialism. They wiped out illiteracy. The party was still on. I've quoted this. It is a historical fact that socialism had great achievements in Venezuela. The problem started in the 2014 oil price drop. But no, no, no. Oh no, everyone knows socialism doesn't work, Caleb. See, look at Venezuela. No, Venezuela has had its problems. Meanwhile, Bolivia had the highest rate of GDP growth in South America for years and years and years. And that's a centrally planned economy created by Evo Morales. I'm so sick of people pointing to Venezuela as proof that socialism doesn't work. Socialism has done miracles in Venezuela. I've been there. I've seen it. I've walked through neighborhoods where every person every house that was built by an interest-free loan from the government. I have seen with my own eyes, what has been done, how illiteracy was wiped out, the kind of things they've built in working class communities. You cannot say socialism doesn't work in Venezuela. You can say that, and the fact that so many people are so loyal to Maduro at this point, right? That after all they've been through, all the crippling sanctions, all the efforts to keep them from importing food, all the efforts to keep them from getting medicine during the pandemic, after all of this, so many people in the country are loyal to Maduro because of what he has achieved and what socialism has achieved. Give me a break. Give me a break. All right. Small businesses and socialism. Well, they need to be regulated, right? I mean, you need to make sure they're not, treating their workers unfairly, not paying them, too low wages, et cetera. But, I think that restaurants, hotels, tech startups have a role in a socialist society, right? And that unleashing them, loaning them money. I think the state should be the supplier of credit to small businesses. And small businesses have a very important role in a state centrally planned economy. I don't think that the model of having everything run by the state is necessarily the correct way to do things anymore. If we've learned anything from the Cold War, one thing I will say is that worker cooperatives are better, right? It's better to have a worker cooperative than it is to just have a regular business with a single owner, right? And so I'd like to see worker cooperatives, but there will be private businesses in socialism, right? And the state should be their creditor, right? The state should have a monopoly on credit, so if they want to get a business loan, they have to get it from the state, and the state should be constantly keeping its eye on them, making sure that they are working, in accordance with the overall vision of society, make sure that they're not doing things that are at society's detriment. There would obviously be no prisons for profit in socialism. There would obviously be no, military contractors and private companies that make money from war, right? But, could there be a private hotel? There should be. Private hotels, private restaurants, maybe even private toy companies, private clothing lines, I think all of these things could exist in a socialist society. But the banks and the major industries and the major means of communication and the natural resources, the commanding heights of economic power should be in public control, so the economy overall doesn't function according to profits. Cops, working class. All right. All righty. Is DSA controlled opposition? I mean, see, again, nuance, okay? I've told you, I've made videos about who started DSA. I've made videos about State Department socialism. But most people that are in DSA are great. They're people just like you and me who want a better country with socialism, right? I think that there's a history of DSA functioning as a more pro-U.S. establishment wing of the socialist movement and pro-U.S. foreign policy in particular. I've talked about Gloria Steinem and her ties to the CIA. I've talked about Michael Harrington and where he came from. I've talked about Max Shachtman. But that doesn't mean that the whole organization and everyone in it is no good. What I'm saying is that you have to understand where these things come from. There are divisions in the ruling class. There are different sections out there. And that the State Department socialists, that's who started DSA. That's what it is. If I was not, in my job right now, I cannot join any political organization as a journalist. But if I was not in that position, I would probably be a member of DSA. I would join DSA and try to meet people, right? And try to support the good things that they do, right? DSA is full of good people doing good work, but, just keep in mind, it was started by, a group of people, and they have support from one section of the ruling class that is funding them, and just keep that in mind. Know what you're dealing with, right? Know what you're dealing with. don't have the illusion that DSA is the workers' revolution from below. It's not, okay? It is a faction that is aligned with one wing of the ruling class. It is what it is, right? That doesn't mean you shouldn't join it. I think it's a great place to meet people. Every DSA event I've ever been to, I've learned a lot, and I've been treated very friendly by people who they may even disagree with me, but they treat me friendly. They know who I am, and they don't seem to, I've never been told I'm not welcome in a DSA event, never. So, I think that people should be friendly to DSA. And just keep in mind who runs the group, who's at the top of the group. I do think that their video of their convention, the no clapping and all of that was a little bit embarrassing, but hey, whatever. All right. The Green New Deal. Well, the concept of the Green New Deal is good. It's a good idea, right? The idea that we would, in order to fight climate change, we would promote nuclear power, we would, fund all kinds of scientific research, build all kinds of new infrastructure. The idea of it is good. The actual policies of the Green New Deal, I'm not too excited about. They seem to be like, kind of lowering the level of energy consumption. It's almost about kind of transitioning the USA to a lower living standard, lower rate of consumption. That I don't agree with. But the concept, right, of a Green New Deal, I think is great. All right. Dems, Jacobin, and Medicare for all. Yeah, right now would be the perfect moment to have Medicare for all, right? And I mean, if there's ever been a moment to fight for Medicare for all, now would be the time to do it. And that's one of the points that Jimmy Dore made, right? Is that now is the time to fight for Medicare for all. Now is the time to fight for Medicare for all, right? Amid a pandemic, it is so obvious we need this. So now is the time that it should be the debate about Medicare for all should be on all the television screens everywhere. We should be pushing why national health care is needed now, in the moment where it is a burning urgency. And the fact that they're letting this moment slip away, if DSA and Jacobin and all of them were doing their jobs, they would be screaming from the heavens about national health care. They'd be organizing national rallies for national health care. They would be making that a central issue right now if they were doing their jobs, because now more than ever, it's so obvious that our medical system is failing. So if people want Medicare for all, universal health insurance for everyone, single payer, now would be the time to do it. And they're letting the moment slip away. And that is an outrage. It's a crying shame. And I'm glad Jimmy Dore is calling them out on that, right? Of all the times. And you'll notice, rather than calling out, the Democrats and making this issue, they're calling out Jimmy Dore for daring to suggest they do it. I mean, you can't believe this, right? That the focus has been on attacking Jimmy Dore for daring they suggest it. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. It shows you how many shills there are out there. All right. Should the USA emulate One Belt, One Road in Latin America? No, the USA should join the Belt and Road and, in cooperation with China, develop Latin America, right? Why does it have to be competition? The USA and China should be friends. There's no reason that the fastest growing economy in the world should be our rival or our enemy. China does not want to fight with the United States. They've made that abundantly clear. All righty. Are cops part of the working class? It depends exactly. Now, some people define working class simply on terms of workers and owners, right? If you don't own your workplace, right? If you sell your labor power to survive, you are a worker. However, if you read Marx, right? Marx makes a big point of talking about, workers in relation to industry, right? There are factory workers who produce surplus value, right? And there's a lot of workers, Marx points out in Capital, who don't produce surplus value, right? For example, all the people who work on the estates of the rich, the nannies who take care of rich people's children, the house cleaners who clean the homes of the rich, they're not producing surplus value. They're selling their labor power to a capitalist, but the capitalist is using it for his own convenience, not to make surplus value, right? So they're technically working class, but they're not producing surplus value. And, and this has been, discussed, right? And that Marx, he gets into a little bit more depth with this when you get into specifics, right? So there's a lot of workers who don't produce surplus value, right? They sell their labor power, right? A worker at a fast food restaurant produces surplus value for the restaurant, but somebody who, is hired by somebody to work in their home or something, Pol Pot, they don't produce surplus value. They're technically part of the working class. But a lot of Marxist literature distinguishes, refers to a group of people that it calls agents. These are people who are technically working class in the sense that they sell their labor, but they don't produce surplus value. Their job is to work on behalf of the ruling class, to extract, to help or work on behalf of the capitalist class to help further extract surplus value from other workers, right? So, for example, the manager in a factory, he's a worker, he's selling his labor, but his job, he doesn't produce surplus value. He's not on the assembly line making products. His job is staying on top of the workers and making them keep working. So, as a manager, he's what many people call an agent, right? He's technically, he's selling his labor power, but he's functioning not in producing surplus value, but as an agent, right? And that cops kind of fit into the same category as managers or supervisors, right? Whereas they are not the owners of capital, but they are agents or supervisors of capital, as class analysis is putting it. And Marx actually talks about this, right? That these are, that the role that they play is not one of producing surplus value, not one of selling their labor power, but one of selling their ability to help extract surplus value from other workers. And I think that's the role that cops play. Now, I don't know enough about post-Pol Pot Cambodia. I really don't know enough about it, Jason. I'm sorry, I can't give you an answer there. I just don't know enough about it. So there you go. So I guess that's where we're going to wrap it up for tonight. It's been fun. I had fun. It's good that we streamed for a little bit. Not every stream can be an epic rant or speech, but I answered your questions for a little while. Glad I did it. Glad we had a nice conversation. I wish you all a happy holiday. I'll probably be on, in the next few days, if not tomorrow, probably once again soon, going on a radio show on Monday. I always enjoy talking to you all. Never underestimate the power of our community. We do great things. I'm really glad about all the work that we do. So best wishes to everyone. Stay warm. Don't get COVID. Keep safe. And let's hope we can get through this crisis soon, because this crisis is a nightmare. Folks, a new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.